In a quiet high school courtyard in suburban Ohio, a shy transfer student with a nervous smile was about to face down a group of relentless bullies. What started as a routine lunch break under the sycamore tree took a shocking turn when they came face to face with a boy no one truly understood. Yet Liam Rourke wasn't your typical new kid in school. For 12 grueling years, he had spent his life in the shadows of elite military operations, known for his unshakable calm, tactical genius, and silent strength. When he encountered a pack of teenage boys throwing insults and food, he had no idea he was about to disrupt the school's toxic social hierarchy forever. Liam didn't flinch. He observed, disarmed with words, and acted with calculated grace, a response that would lead to a chain reaction of respect, fear, and deep personal reckonings for everyone involved. What began as a humiliating setup on his first day would become a reckoning of justice and hidden identity revealed. The students and staff of Ridgeview High would never be the same after witnessing what true discipline and real strength looked like when worn by someone who never needed to prove it. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The hallways of Hawkridge Academy buzzed with the familiar chaos of mid-semester Monday morning, but Liam Reyes moved through it like a ghost. His footsteps were measured, deliberate, each one calculated to avoid drawing attention. At 19, he should have graduated months ago. But life had taken detours that most teenagers couldn't fathom. Students pressed against lockers as he passed, their conversations dropping to whispers. There was something about the new kid that made people uneasy, not threatening, exactly, but unsettling. His dark hair was cut military short, his posture unnaturally straight, and his eyes swept the hallway with the methodical precision of someone trained to catalog threats. He wore the same clothes as everyone else, but somehow they looked different on him, like a uniform disguised as casual wear. Elena said to stay under the radar, he muttered to himself, adjusting the strap of his worn backpack. His sisters. Words from that morning echoed in his mind. Please, Liam, just be a normal kid. Try to fit in. Normal. The word felt foreign on his tongue. In his first period psychology class, Liam claimed a seat in the back corner, positioning himself where he could see both the door and the windows. Old habits. Miss Patel, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a practical bun, noticed his careful positioning but said nothing. She'd seen this behavior before in her previous work as a child therapist. She'd learned to recognize the signs of trauma in young people. Today we're going to do something different, Miss Patel announced, her voice carrying the warmth of someone who genuinely cared about her students. I want you to pair up with someone you don't know well. You'll be creating a getting to know you presentation about your partner. Groans rippled through the classroom. Liam's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He'd been hoping to remain invisible, to blend into the background until he could figure out how to navigate this strange new world of teenage normalcy. Looks like you're stuck with me, said a voice beside him. Liam turned to see a girl with short auburn hair and intelligent green eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She held a small digital camera in her hands, fingers dancing over its controls with practiced ease. I'm Skylar Brooks. I'm guessing you're the mysterious new transfer everyone's been whispering about. Liam Reyes, he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. There was something about her direct gaze that made him want to retreat further into himself. So, Skylar continued, seemingly unbothered by his reticence, where'd you transfer from? Mars? Because that's the only explanation for how you managed to look like you're from another planet. Despite himself, Liam's lips almost curved into a smile. Almost. Just another school, far from here. Skylar studied him with the intensity of someone accustomed to looking beyond surfaces. I do a lot of documentary work, she said, gesturing to her camera. I'm good at reading people. And you, Liam Reyes, are running from something. His entire body tensed. I'm not running from anything. No, she said thoughtfully. You're running towards something. The question is what? The bell rang, sharp and sudden. Liam flinched, his hands instinctively moving to a defensive position before he caught himself. The sound had triggered something deep in his memory, whistles, shouting, the controlled chaos of tactical training. For a moment, he wasn't in a high school classroom, but back in the youth cadet program, where split-second reactions meant the difference between success and failure. You okay? Skylar asked, her camera forgotten as she leaned forward with genuine concern. Fine, he said, but his breathing was shallow, controlled. Just ... loud. That afternoon in gym class, the whistle blew again. This time, Liam couldn't hide his reaction. He dropped to a crouch, his eyes scanning for threats, his body coiled like a spring. The other students stared, some laughing, others looking uncomfortable. Coach Morrison, a burly man with a perpetual scowl, looked annoyed rather than concerned. What's the matter, Reyes? Never heard a whistle before? The laughter grew louder. Liam slowly stood, his face burning with humiliation. He could feel every eye in the gymnasium on him, cataloging his weakness, filing it away for future use. In the Special Forces Youth Program, showing vulnerability was dangerous. Here, it was apparently entertaining. That night, Liam sat at the small kitchen table in the apartment he shared with his sister Elena. She was 24, exhausted from working 2 jobs to keep them afloat, but she still made time to check on him every evening. Her dark eyes, so similar to his own, held a mixture of love and worry that had become her default expression since taking custody of him. How was your first day? She asked, setting a plate of reheated takeout in front of him. Fine, he said, the lie coming easily. He'd been protecting people from his problems for so long that it had become second nature. Elena sat across from him, her own food untouched. Liam, I know this is hard. Starting over, trying to be normal after everything you've been through. But you have to promise me you'll try. No more fighting. No more ... military stuff. Just be a teenager. He nodded, but inside, he wondered if he even remembered how to be a teenager. The past 2 years in the Special Forces Youth Program had changed him in ways he was still discovering. He'd been trained to assess threats, to maintain emotional control under pressure, to make life or death decisions with incomplete information. Now he was supposed to worry about homework and fitting in with kids who had never experienced anything more dangerous than a pop quiz. Later that night, alone in his room, Liam allowed himself to remember. He'd been 17 when he joined the program, still reeling from the violent robbery that had left his mother disabled and his father dead. The military had offered him purpose, structure, a way to channel his anger into something useful. For 2 years, he'd trained alongside other exceptional young people, learning skills that most adults would never master. He'd been good at it too. Good, maybe. The missions had become increasingly dangerous, and the psychological pressure had begun to crack even his carefully constructed walls. The official discharge papers cited psychological fatigue and recommended civilian reintegration. What they didn't mention was the nightmares, the hypervigilance, the way his body refused to relax even in sleep. What they didn't mention was how hard it was to go back to being just another kid, when you'd seen and done things that would haunt you forever. As he finally drifted off to sleep, Liam's last coherent thought was a prayer to whoever might be listening. Just let me disappear. Let me be invisible. Let me be normal. But normal was a luxury he wouldn't be allowed to keep. Chase Danner ruled Hawkridge Academy with the casual confidence of someone who had never been denied anything he wanted. At 18, he was everything the school worshipped. Quarterback of the football team, son of a prominent local politician, and blessed with the kind of easy charm that made teachers overlook his academic shortcomings and girls ignore his character flaws. His blonde hair was perfectly styled, his smile practiced, and his sense of entitlement so complete that he genuinely believed the world owed him deference. It was in the locker room after gym class that Chase first truly noticed Liam Reyes. New kid was changing into his regular clothes with the same methodical precision he seemed to apply to everything else. Folding his gym clothes with military corners and checking his surroundings with those unsettling dark eyes. "Hey, new guy," Chase called out, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to being obeyed. "You got a name, or should we just call you Terminator?" A few of his teammates laughed on cue. Tyler Mason, Chase's closest friend and fellow athlete, grinned nervously. Ty had noticed something different about Liam too. But where Chase saw a challenge to his authority, Ty sensed something more dangerous, a stillness that reminded him of the way animals went quiet before a storm. Liam looked up, his expression neutral. "Liam Reyes." "Liam Reyes," Chase repeated, drawing out the syllables mockingly. "What's your story, Liam? You some kind of military brat? Because you've got that whole yes sir, no sir thing going on." "Something like that," Liam replied, his voice steady and quiet. He finished changing and started toward the door, clearly hoping to avoid further interaction. But Chase wasn't done. He stepped into Liam's path, using his height and build to create an intimidating presence. "See, here's the thing, Reyes. Hawkridge has a certain ecosystem, and new fish need to understand their place in the food chain." The locker room had gone quiet. Other students pretended to mind their own business while secretly watching the confrontation unfold. This was how Chase operated. Public displays of dominance that reminded everyone of the natural order. Liam studied Chase with the same calm intensity he'd shown in psychology class. When he spoke, his words were measured, chosen with surgical precision. "I'm not looking for trouble. I just want to get through senior year." "Nobody's looking for trouble," Chase said, his smile predatory. "But sometimes trouble finds you anyway. Especially when you carry yourself like you're better than everyone else." "I don't think I'm better than anyone," Liam replied. "I think I'm different. And I think you're smart enough to recognize the difference." The words hung in the air like a challenge, but not the kind Chase was expecting. There was no aggression in Liam's tone, no posturing or bravado. Just a quiet statement of fact that somehow felt more threatening than any raised voice or clenched fist. Chase felt his face flush. The little freak was trying to make him look weak in front of his team. Different how? "What makes you so special?" Liam's eyes never left Chase's face. "I'm not special. I'm just someone who's learned that the loudest person in the room usually has the least to say." The silence stretched, electric with tension. Ty found himself holding his breath, waiting for Chase to explode. But Chase was smart enough to recognize when he was being played. Getting physical with the new kid would only make him look like a bully, which he was, but he preferred to maintain plausible deniability. Instead, he laughed, the sound sharp and artificial. "You know what? You're right. You are different. Most people here have personalities." This time the laughter from his teammates was genuine, if nervous. Chase had salvaged the moment, turned it into a joke at Liam's expense. But as the group dispersed and headed to their next classes, Ty noticed that Liam's expression hadn't changed. He hadn't looked hurt or angry or embarrassed. He'd simply absorbed the insult, the way a stone absorbs water, completely unmoved. "Weird kid," Chase muttered as they walked down the hallway. "Thinks he's some kind of tough guy." "Maybe he is," Ty said quietly. Chase shot him a sharp look. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing, man, just there's something about him, like he's been through stuff." "We've all been through stuff," Chase said dismissively. "That doesn't make him special." But privately, Chase was bothered. He'd built his reputation on being able to read people, to find their weaknesses and exploit them. Liam Reyes was like trying to read a book written in a foreign language. The words were familiar, but the meaning remained elusive. From across the hallway, Skylar Brooks watched the exchange with interest. She'd been filming B-roll footage for her documentary project when she'd noticed the tension in the locker room doorway. Her camera had caught the entire confrontation, and now she was reviewing the footage on her camera's small screen. What she saw there made her pulse quicken. Most people would have focused on Chase's obvious aggression, but Skylar was trained to look deeper. She noticed how Liam had positioned himself during the confrontation, balanced, ready to move in any direction, with clear lines of escape. She noticed how his breathing had remained steady even when Chase invaded his personal space. Most tellingly, she noticed the way his eyes had never stopped moving, cataloging exits and potential threats with the systematic efficiency of someone who'd been trained to survive. Fascinating, she murmured to herself, already planning her next move. Liam Reyes was going to make an excellent subject for her documentary. She just had to figure out how to get him to trust her with his story. The rest of the day passed in a series of small confrontations. Chase made sure to cross paths with Liam between classes, each time escalating the psychological pressure. He'd bump into him in the hallway and apologize with exaggerated politeness. He'd make loud comments about military school dropouts when Liam was within earshot. He'd catch Liam's eye across the cafeteria and smile that cold, predatory smile. Through it all, Liam remained impassive. He ate his lunch alone, completed his assignments without complaint, and walked through the halls with the same measured pace. To most observers, he seemed unaffected by Chase's attention. But Skylar, who had made it her business to study him, noticed the subtle signs of stress, the slight tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes had begun to scan the environment more frequently, the careful way he positioned himself to avoid being cornered. By the end of the day, Chase's curiosity had transformed into something uglier. The new kid's refusal to be intimidated felt like a personal insult, a challenge to everything Chase represented. He'd built his identity around being the apex predator of Hawkridge Academy, and Liam's presence threatened that carefully constructed image. "He thinks he's tough," Chase told his inner circle as they gathered in the parking lot after school. "Tomorrow we're going to show him what tough really looks like." Ty shifted uncomfortably. "Maybe we should just leave him alone, man. He's not bothering anyone." "He's bothering me," Chase replied, his voice carrying a dangerous edge. "And that's enough." The cafeteria at Hawkridge Academy was a carefully orchestrated social battlefield, with each table representing a different faction in the school's complex hierarchy. The jocks commanded the center tables, their voices loud and confident. The popular girls held court near the windows, their laughter sharp and calculating. The various academic clubs and social groups clustered around the periphery, each defending their small territories with unspoken but rigid rules. Liam sat alone at a small table near the emergency exit, a position he'd chosen with the same tactical awareness he brought to everything else. His back was to the wall, giving him a clear view of the entire cafeteria, and he was close enough to the door to leave quickly if necessary. He ate his sandwich methodically, a paperback novel propped open beside his tray, a barrier between himself and the social chaos surrounding him. 3 weeks into the semester, he'd established a routine that allowed him to navigate the school day with minimal conflict. He arrived early, stayed late, and had mapped out routes between classes that avoided the main traffic areas where Chase and his crew typically congregated. It wasn't a perfect system, but it had kept him relatively invisible. That was about to change. Chase had spent the morning perfecting his plan. It wasn't enough to simply embarrass Liam. He needed to do it in a way that would establish his dominance once and for all. He'd noticed the way other students had begun to watch the new kid with curious respect, the way even some of his own teammates seemed wary of crossing him. That couldn't be allowed to continue. The inspiration had come from an overheard conversation. In the hallway, someone had mentioned seeing military gear in Liam's locker, and Chase's political instincts had immediately recognized the opportunity. In a post-9/11 world, military service was supposed to be respected, but teenagers were cruel and easily manipulated. The right kind of mockery could turn even heroism into humiliation. "You sure about this?" Ty asked as they approached Liam's table. He'd been increasingly uncomfortable with Chase's escalating obsession with the new kid, but his loyalty to his friend kept him from voicing serious objections. "Relax," Chase said, his smile confident. "It's just a joke. Kid needs to learn to lighten up." Behind them, Marcus Webb and Jake Sullivan carried a cardboard box, their expressions a mixture of excitement and nervousness. They'd spent the morning preparing the props, fake military medals from a costume shop, a collection of toy soldiers, and a makeshift certificate of honor that Chase had created on his computer. Skylar Brooks sat 3 tables away, her camera ready but hidden. She'd been documenting the social dynamics of the school for her senior project, and she'd noticed the increasing tension between Chase and Liam. Her instincts told her something significant was about to happen. "Ladies and gentlemen," Chase announced, his voice carrying across the cafeteria with practiced authority, "I'd like to take a moment to honor our newest student." Conversations died as students turned to look. The cafeteria staff behind the serving line paused in their work, sensing the shift in atmosphere. Liam looked up from his book, his dark eyes immediately assessing the situation. "Liam Reyes," Chase continued, approaching the table with exaggerated formality, "has joined us after his heroic service in the military. And I think it's time we showed him the respect he deserves." The box was placed on Liam's table with theatrical ceremony. Marcus and Jake stepped back, grinning nervously. The entire cafeteria was watching now, phones appearing as students sensed entertainment in making. "Go ahead," Chase said, his voice dripping with false sincerity. "Show everyone what a real hero looks like." Liam stared at the box, his expression unreadable. Inside his chest, warning bells were ringing. He'd been in enough combat situations to recognize the moment when peaceful resolution became impossible. This wasn't random teenage cruelty. This was a calculated attack designed to destroy his ability to remain invisible. Slowly, he reached for the box. The moment his hands touched it, the bottom gave way, a deliberate design flaw that sent the contents spilling across the table and onto the floor. Fake medals scattered like confetti, toy soldiers rolled under nearby tables, and the certificate fluttered to the ground. The laughter started immediately. Students pointed and giggled at the childish military toys, the obvious fakeness of the medals, the absurdity of the situation. Chase stood over it, all like a conductor orchestrating a symphony of humiliation. "Wow," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the laughter. "These are some really impressive decorations. I especially like this one." He picked up a plastic medal shaped like a hamburger, a gag gift from a novelty store. The Purple Heart. "For outstanding service in the food court." More laughter. Someone shouted, "Stolen valor." From across the room, another voice called out, "Fake soldier." The mockery built on itself, feeding off the crowd's energy. Through it all, Liam remained perfectly still. His breathing was controlled, his posture unchanged. But inside, something was fracturing. The careful walls he'd built around his memories were cracking, and images from his past flickered through his mind like a broken film reel, the training facility where he'd pushed his body and mind to their limits. The faces of his fellow cadets, some of whom hadn't made it home from their missions. The weight of real responsibility, real danger, real consequences. The decision to leave it all behind, to try to build a normal life from the wreckage of his youth. Chase picked up the fake certificate, holding it high for everyone to see. "I present to you," he announced with mock solemnity, "our very own G.I. Joe. Let's all give him a salute." The salute was the final straw. Chase's hand moved too, his forehead in an exaggerated military gesture, and suddenly every sound in the cafeteria disappeared. Liam was 17 again, standing at attention while his commanding officer explained why his team's mission had been scrubbed. He was in the hospital, watching his mother struggle to remember his name after the attack that had changed everything. He was in the briefing room, learning that his last mission had been classified as a failure despite everything he'd sacrificed to complete it. The walls came down. Liam stood slowly, his movements deliberate and controlled. The laughter died as students noticed the change in his demeanor. Where before he'd seemed distant and detached, now he radiated something that made everyone in the cafeteria instinctively step back. Chase, still drunk on his moment of triumph, didn't notice the shift. "What's wrong, soldier boy? Can't take a joke?" Liam's voice, when he finally spoke, was barely above a whisper. But in the sudden silence of the cafeteria, it carried clearly to every corner of the room. "You have no idea what you're talking about." The words were simple, but they carried a weight that made Chase's confident smile falter. For the first time since beginning his campaign against Liam, Chase saw something in the new kid's eyes that made him wonder if he'd miscalculated. "It's just a joke, man," Chase said, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "Don't be so serious." Liam looked around the cafeteria, taking in the faces of his classmates. Some looked amused, others uncomfortable. A few seemed to be waiting for him to explode, to give them the violence they'd been unconsciously craving. Instead, he knelt and began collecting the scattered toys and fake medals. His movements were precise, methodical, like a soldier policing a battlefield. The silence stretched, broken only by the soft sound of plastic clicking against plastic. When he was finished, Liam placed everything back in the box. Then he looked directly at Chase, his dark eyes holding the quarterback's gaze with uncomfortable intensity. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for showing everyone who you really are." Then he walked away, leaving Chase standing alone in the center of the cafeteria, surrounded by the debris of his own cruelty. The laughter had died completely now, replaced by an uncomfortable silence that made everyone remember they were supposed to be better than this. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Skylar lowered her camera, her heart pounding. She'd captured it all: the setup, the humiliation, and most importantly, Liam's response. But watching it unfold in real life had been different from viewing it through a lens. She'd seen something in Liam's eyes during those final moments that made her understand why Chase had been so determined to break him. The new kid wasn't just different. He was dangerous. Not in the way Chase thought, not physically threatening or unstable, but dangerous in the way that truth was dangerous to lies. The way authentic strength was dangerous to manufactured power. As the cafeteria slowly returned to normal, as conversations resumed and the incident began to fade into gossip, Skylar made a decision. She was going to find Liam Reyes and she was going to tell his real story. Not because she felt sorry for him, but because she suspected that story might be exactly what Hawkridge Academy needed to hear. Behind the gym building, where the afternoon shadows provided cover from curious eyes, Liam finally allowed himself to break. He sat on the concrete steps, his head in his hands, and let the carefully controlled facade crumble. The tears came silently, years of suppressed emotion finally finding their way to the surface. He'd tried so hard to be normal, to fit in, to leave his past behind. But the past had followed him here, twisted and weaponized by someone who saw strength as a threat to be eliminated. The military training that had once given him purpose now felt like a burden, a mark that would forever separate him from the ordinary life he craved. As he sat there, trying to piece himself back together, Liam made a decision that would change everything. He was done being invisible. He was done trying to be someone he wasn't. If they wanted to see who he really was, then maybe it was time to show them. The war for Liam Reyes' soul was about to begin in earnest. And this time, he wouldn't be fighting it alone. The psychology classroom felt different after hours. The harsh fluorescent lights had been dimmed to a warmer setting, and the usual chaos of teenage voices had been replaced by a contemplative quiet. Miss Patel sat across from Liam at her desk, her hands folded calmly as she watched him struggle with words he'd never spoken aloud. "You don't have to tell me everything," she said gently. "But I think you need to tell someone something. The weight you're carrying, it's too much for one person." Liam stared at his hands, noting the small scars across his knuckles from training. Exercises he couldn't discuss. 3 days had passed since the cafeteria incident, and the whispers had only grown louder. Students looked at him differently, now some with curiosity, others with fear, most with the uncomfortable recognition that they'd witnessed something they didn't understand. "I left something behind," he said finally, his voice barely audible. "Something important. And I don't know if I can get it back." Miss Patel leaned forward slightly. "What kind of something?" "Purpose." The word came out like a confession. "I knew who I was supposed to be, what I was supposed to do. Now I'm just lost. Tell me about before you came here." Liam's jaw tightened. Elena had made him promise not to discuss the specifics of his military service, worried that it would only make his integration more difficult. But the careful lies were becoming harder to maintain. "I was in a specialized program," he said carefully, "for teenagers with certain aptitudes. It was supposed to prepare us for adult service, but some of us weren't ready for what that meant." Miss Patel nodded, recognizing the careful language of someone who'd been coached on operational security. "And the program ended?" "I ended it." Liam looked up, his dark eyes filled with something that looked like shame. "I couldn't handle the pressure anymore. The things they asked us to do, the responsibility, I broke under it." "That doesn't sound like breaking to me," Miss Patel said quietly. "That sounds like a young person recognizing their limits and making a healthy choice." "Healthy?" Liam's laugh was bitter. "I was supposed to be stronger than that. Everyone else in my unit managed to complete their service. I'm the one who couldn't cut it." Miss Patel reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a small card. On it was printed a breathing exercise, the kind used in trauma therapy. "I want you to try something. When you feel that tension building, the way it did in the cafeteria, I want you to use this technique. 4 counts in, hold for 4, 4 counts out. It's used by combat veterans to manage stress responses." Liam took the card, his eyes widening slightly at her choice of words. "How did you—" "I've worked with a lot of young people who've seen things they shouldn't have seen," she said simply. "You're not as alone as you think you are." Meanwhile, in the school's media lab, Skylar Brooks was making a decision that would change everything. She'd spent the past 3 days reviewing the footage from the cafeteria, watching Liam's response frame by frame. What she saw there convinced her that the story everyone thought they knew was completely wrong. The knock on the lab door was soft, hesitant. Skylar looked up to see Liam standing in the doorway, his usual careful posture somehow more vulnerable than she'd seen before. "The footage," he said without preamble. "From the cafeteria. Do you still have it?" "I do." Skylar gestured to the chair beside her editing station. "Want to see it?" Liam sat down, his eyes fixed on the monitor as Skylar pulled up the file. They watched in silence as the events unfold, Chase's theatrical setup, the laughter of their classmates, and finally, Liam's quiet dignity in the face of public humiliation. "I look weak," Liam said when it was over. "You look human," Skylar corrected. "Which is more than I can say for most people in this school." She turned to face him directly. "I want to tell your real story, Liam, not the version Chase created. But the truth, whatever that is." Liam was quiet for a long moment. What if the truth isn't what people want to hear? "The truth isn't supposed to be comfortable," Skylar replied. "That's what makes it powerful." For the first time since arriving at Hawkridge Academy, Liam felt something he'd almost forgotten, the possibility of being understood. "Okay," he said quietly. But if we do this, we do it right. No half-truths, no dramatic music, just what happened. Deal, Skylar said, extending her hand. When Liam shook it, she noticed the controlled strength in his grip, the calluses that spoke of intensive training. Can I ask you something? What made you decide to trust me? Liam considered the question seriously. You see things differently than other people. You look for the story behind the story. And you didn't laugh in the cafeteria. That evening, Elena found Liam sitting at their kitchen table, staring at Ms. Patel's breathing exercise card. Her work uniform was wrinkled from a double shift at the diner, and her dark hair was escaping from its ponytail, but her attention was entirely focused on her younger brother. Bad day? She asked, settling into the chair across from him. Actually, Liam said, surprising them both, it might have been a good day. I talked to someone about things, real things. Elena's eyes filled with tears she tried to hide. Liam, I know I said to keep everything quiet, but if you need help, I need to stop pretending I'm someone I'm not, Liam interrupted gently. The military training, the things I learned, they're part of who I am. Hiding from that isn't helping anyone. I just want you to be safe, Elena whispered. I want you to have a normal life. Maybe normal isn't what I need, Liam said. Maybe I need to figure out how to be me in this world, instead of trying to be someone else. Across town, Ty Mason was having his own crisis of conscience. He sat in his car outside Chase's house, staring at his phone. The group chat was full of plans for escalating their campaign against Liam, ideas that made Ty's stomach turn. He thought about his younger brother Marcus, who'd been bullied mercilessly in middle school until Ty had intervened. The memory of Marcus crying in his room, asking why kids could be so cruel, made Ty's decision for him. He typed a simple message, I'm out. This has gone too far. The response was immediate and vicious. Chase called him weak, questioned his loyalty, threatened to make him the next target. But Ty had already turned off his phone. For the first time in years, he felt like he could sleep without the weight of complicity pressing down on his chest. The monthly assembly at Hawkridge Academy was a carefully orchestrated display of school spirit and administrative messaging. Students filed into the gymnasium with varying degrees of enthusiasm, the younger classes claiming seats near the front while the seniors sprawled across the back bleachers with practiced indifference. Liam chose his spot near the middle, close enough to the aisle that he could leave quickly if necessary. The past week had been different. Students still stared, but the quality of their attention had shifted. Some seemed curious rather than hostile, others appeared almost respectful. Skylar's influence was subtle but noticeable. She'd been asking questions, conducting informal interviews, gently challenging the narrative that Chase had constructed. Principal Martinez droned through the usual announcements: upcoming fundraisers, academic achievements, reminders about dress code compliance. The students' attention wandered predictably, conversations murmuring across the bleachers despite the administration's attempts to maintain order. Chase sat with what remained of his inner circle, his usual confidence tempered by recent setbacks. Ty's defection had been a public humiliation, and other teammates were beginning to question his leadership. The new kid's stubborn refusal to be broken was making Chase look weak, and in the social ecosystem of high school, weakness was fatal. Time to end this, Chase muttered to Marcus Webb, who nodded nervously. They'd planned the final confrontation carefully, public enough to re-establish Chase's dominance, but subtle enough to avoid serious consequences from the administration. As Principal Martinez concluded his remarks and dismissed the assembly, Chase moved. He positioned himself at the bottom of the bleachers, directly in the path Liam would take to reach the exit. His remaining followers spread out behind him, creating a human barrier that would force the confrontation Liam had been avoiding. Hey, soldier boy, Chase called out as Liam approached. His voice carried clearly through the gymnasium, drawing the attention of students who were filing past. Got a minute? Liam stopped, his dark eyes quickly assessing the situation. He was outnumbered, cornered, and surrounded by witnesses, exactly the kind of tactical disadvantage he'd been trained to avoid. But retreat wasn't an option anymore. Too many people were watching, and running would only confirm Chase's narrative about his weakness. "What do you want, Chase?" Liam's voice was calm, but those who knew him could hear the steel underneath. "Just wanted to thank you," Chase said, his smile predatory, "for showing everyone what real courage looks like. It takes a special kind of bravery to run away from a few plastic toys." The crowd was gathering now, phones appearing as students sensed entertainment. Skylar positioned herself where she could capture everything, her camera ready but concealed. She'd been documenting the escalating tension for days, building a complete record of Chase's systematic harassment. "I'm not looking for trouble," Liam said, echoing his words from weeks before. But this time, there was something different in his posture, a subtle shift that suggested his patience was finally reaching its limit. "Nobody's looking for trouble," Chase replied, stepping closer. "I just think you owe everyone an apology. For pretending to be something you're not. For lying about your service record. For making us all feel sorry for a fake." The words hung in the air like an accusation. Around them, students waited to see how Liam would respond. Would he deny the charges? Would he finally break down and admit to being a fraud? Or would he simply walk away again, confirming their suspicions about his cowardice? Instead, Liam did something unexpected. He smiled. It wasn't a friendly expression or a nervous one. It was the smile of someone who had finally decided to stop playing by rules that were never designed to protect him. The smile of someone who had been pushed past the point where peaceful resolution remained possible. "You're right," Liam said quietly. "I have been pretending. I've been pretending that you matter. I've been pretending that your opinion carries weight. I've been pretending that this," he gestured to the crowd of watching students, "is somehow important." Chase's confident expression faltered slightly. This wasn't the response he'd expected. "But here's what I'm not pretending about," Liam continued, his voice still calm but carrying a new edge. "I'm not pretending that I don't see the way you've been manipulating everyone around you. I'm not pretending that I don't understand exactly what you're trying to do. And I'm not pretending that I don't know how to stop you. Is that a threat?" Chase demanded, trying to regain control of the situation. "It's a statement of fact," Liam replied. "You've built your entire identity around being feared and respected. But you're not actually strong, Chase. You're not actually brave. You're just louder than everyone else." The gymnasium had gone completely quiet now. Students who had been heading for the exit stopped to watch. Even the teachers and administrators seemed frozen, unsure how to intervene in a confrontation that felt like it was building toward something significant. Chase's face flushed red. The careful composure he'd maintained throughout his campaign against Liam finally cracked. "You think you're tough? You think you're better than me? I think I'm different than you," Liam said, his words deliberate and precise. "I think when people respect me, it's because of who I am, not because of who I can hurt." That was when Chase made his fatal mistake. Driven by rage and humiliation, he shoved Liam hard in the chest, trying to provoke the physical confrontation he'd been building toward for weeks. The push was clumsy, telegraphed, the kind of aggressive move that worked on normal teenagers who weren't trained to read violence before it happened. But Liam wasn't a normal teenager. What happened next took less than 3 seconds, but to the watching students, it seemed to unfold in slow motion. Liam's body shifted almost imperceptibly, his weight redistributing as Chase's hands made contact. Instead of stumbling backward as expected, he moved forward and to the side, his right hand capturing Chase's extended wrist while his left arm snaked around Chase's elbow. The joint lock was textbook perfect, a standing submission that immobilized Chase completely without causing permanent damage. Liam's movements were so smooth, so controlled, that many of the watching students didn't immediately understand what had happened. They just saw Chase suddenly frozen in place, his face contorted with pain and shock. "Here's the thing about real strength," Liam said quietly, his voice carrying clearly through the silent gymnasium. "It doesn't need to announce itself. It doesn't need to hurt people to prove it exists. And it knows exactly when to stop." He held the position for exactly 5 seconds, long enough to make his point, not long enough to cause injury. Then he released Chase and stepped back, his hands open and non-threatening. Chase stumbled, his face cycling through confusion, pain, and humiliation. The entire confrontation had lasted less than 30 seconds, but the social dynamics of Hawkridge Academy had been fundamentally altered. The supposed victim had revealed himself to be something else entirely, and the supposed predator had been exposed as merely another frightened teenager with more bark than bite. "I'm sorry that happened," Liam said, and his voice carried genuine regret, "but I'm not sorry for who I am anymore." Then he walked away, leaving Chase standing alone in the center of the gymnasium, surrounded by the debris of his shattered reputation. The video was everywhere within hours. Skylar's footage, combined with cell phone recordings from dozens of witnesses, had created a complete record of Chase Danner's downfall. But more than that, it had revealed something about Liam Reyes that changed everything. The principal's office felt smaller than usual, with both boys sitting across from Martinez's desk. Chase slumped in his chair, his usual confidence replaced by sullen defensiveness. Liam sat perfectly straight, his hands folded calmly in his lap, somehow managing to look both respectful and utterly unrepentant. "Mr. Danner," Principal Martinez began, his voice heavy with disappointment, "would you like to explain why you thought it was appropriate to physically assault another student?" "It wasn't assault," Chase muttered. "I barely touched him." "The video evidence suggests otherwise," Martinez replied coolly. "What I saw was a clear case of physical aggression that Mr. Reyes had every right to defend against." Chase's head snapped up. "Defend against? Did you see what he did to me? That was some kind of martial arts move." "Yes," Martinez said dryly, "and remarkably restrained, considering the circumstances. Mr. Reyes, do you wish to press charges?" Liam shook his head. "No, sir. I think Chase has learned what he needed to learn." "This is bullshit," Chase exploded, then caught himself. "I mean, this isn't fair. He's been lying to everyone about who he is." "And who is he, Mr. Danner?" Martinez asked. "Because from what I observed, he's a young man who showed remarkable restraint when provoked, who used the minimum force necessary to protect himself, and who demonstrated more maturity in 30 seconds than you've shown in 4 years at this school." The words hit Chase like physical blows. He looked between Martinez and Liam, searching for some sign that this was all a mistake, that the natural order would reassert itself and put him back on top where he belonged. Instead, he found only consequences. "You're suspended for 1 week," Martinez continued. "When you return, you'll be removed from the football team pending a disciplinary review. And Mr. Danner, if I hear of any retaliation against Mr. Reyes or any other student, your suspension will become permanent." An hour later, Skylar found Liam sitting alone in the school's courtyard, staring at his hands as if they belonged to someone else. The afternoon sun filtered through the trees, casting shifting shadows across the concrete benches. "Regrets?" she asked, settling beside him with her camera bag. "About defending myself? No." Liam looked up, his dark eyes thoughtful. "About letting it get that far? Definitely." "You know what I think?" Skylar said, pulling out her camera and checking the settings. "I think you've been afraid of who you really are. And today, for the first time, you let people see it. And what did they see? Someone worth knowing." Skylar turned the camera toward him, but didn't start recording yet. "I want to tell your story, Liam, the real one. But I need you to trust me with it." Liam was quiet for a long moment, watching students pass by in the distance. Some pointed in his direction, their conversations animated. Others gave him respectful nods or small waves. The social landscape had shifted overnight, and he was still processing the implications. "What do you want to know?" he asked finally. "Everything," Skylar said, pressing record. "Start with why you're really here." For the next hour, Liam talked. He spoke about the youth cadet program, about training that pushed teenagers to their physical and psychological limits. He talked about missions he couldn't fully describe, about the weight of responsibility that no 17-year-old should carry. He explained his decision to leave, the guilt he felt about disappointing his instructors and fellow cadets, and his struggle to find a place in a world that felt foreign after years of military structure. "I thought if I could just be normal," he said toward the end. "If I could just disappear into regular teenage life, maybe I could forget what I'd been trained to do. Maybe I could be someone else." "But that someone else isn't you," Skylar observed. "No," Liam agreed. "It's not. And pretending to be him was making me miserable." That evening, Skylar uploaded her documentary to the school's media platform with the title "Strength Isn't What You Think." The 20-minute film combined interview footage with Liam, recordings of Chase's harassment campaign, and the gymnasium confrontation that had changed everything. But more than just documenting events, Skylar had crafted a narrative about what real strength looked like. She showed Liam's restraint in the face of constant provocation, his attempts to de-escalate situations through words rather than violence, and finally, his controlled response when peaceful resolution became impossible. The video went viral within the school community. Students who had laughed at Liam during the cafeteria incident now saw their behavior in a different light. The fake military decorations that had seemed so amusing suddenly felt cruel and small. Chase's campaign of harassment, when viewed as a complete pattern, revealed itself as something darker than teenage rivalry. Riley Chang, president of the debate team and one of the school's most respected students, watched the video twice before making her decision. She found Liam the next morning, approaching him with the directness that had made her a formidable competitor in academic contests. "I want you to join our team," she said without preamble. "We need someone who can think strategically under pressure, and after yesterday, I think you qualify." Liam looked surprised. "I'm not much of a public speaker." "You don't need to be loud to be heard," Riley replied. "In fact, some of the most powerful arguments are delivered quietly. People lean in when they have to listen." The invitation represented something Liam hadn't expected: acceptance, not despite his background, but because of it. Riley wasn't offering him a chance to hide or pretend to be normal. She was asking him to contribute his unique perspective to something meaningful. "Okay," he said, and meant it. "I'd like that." At home that night, Alina and Liam sat together on their small apartment's couch, watching Skylar's documentary on Alina's laptop. When it ended, Alina was crying not from sadness, but from something that might have been pride. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, "for asking you to hide who you are. For being so afraid of what people might think that I made you." "Afraid too. You were protecting me," Liam replied. "That's what family does." "But you don't need protecting anymore, do you?" Alina smiled through her tears. "You never really did. I just needed time to see it." For the first time since arriving at Hawkridge Academy, Liam felt like he might actually belong somewhere. Not because he'd learned to disappear, but because he'd finally stopped trying to. The self-defense and wellness group that Ms. Patel proposed started as an experiment, with just 5 students meeting in her classroom after school. Liam had resisted the idea initially, worried about drawing more attention to himself, but something about the collection of quiet, watchful teenagers who showed up that first Tuesday made him reconsider. There was Maya, a sophomore who'd transferred from 3 different schools due to bullying. David, a senior with anxiety so severe he'd stopped eating lunch in the cafeteria. Sarah, whose older brother had been deployed overseas, leaving her to navigate high school while managing her family's constant worry. Marcus, Ty's younger brother, who'd heard about the group through whispered conversations and desperate hope. "We're not here to fix anyone," Miss Patel said at their first meeting, her voice gentle but firm. "We're here to give you tools. Tools. For managing stress, for setting boundaries, for recognizing your own strength." Liam found himself in an unexpected position, not as a patient or client, but as someone whose experiences might actually help others. Miss Patel had asked him to demonstrate some basic grounding techniques, the same ones he'd learned to manage his own PTSD symptoms. "When your mind starts racing," he explained to the small group, "when you feel like you're losing control, try this." He demonstrated the breathing exercise Miss Patel had taught him, the 4-count rhythm that could slow a racing heartbeat and clear a panicked mind. It's not magic, it won't solve everything, but it gives you a moment to choose your response instead of just reacting. Maya raised her hand tentatively. "What if someone won't leave you alone? What if talking doesn't work?" Liam considered the question seriously. Sometimes you have to set a physical boundary. But the goal isn't to hurt anyone, it's to create space so you can get help or get away. He demonstrated a simple wrist release, the kind of basic technique that could free someone from an unwanted grab without causing injury. The most important thing is knowing that you have options. Feeling powerless is what bullies count on. Meanwhile, across the school, Chase Danner was discovering what powerlessness actually felt like. His suspension had been extended after the disciplinary review revealed a pattern of harassment that went back years. Former victims had come forward, emboldened by Liam's example and Skylar's documentation. The football team, desperate to distance themselves from the scandal, had voted to permanently remove him as captain. Ty found Chase sitting alone behind the gymnasium during lunch, in the same spot where Liam had once struggled with his own breakdown. The difference was striking. Where Liam had maintained his dignity even in his lowest moment, Chase looked small and broken, his usual confidence replaced by bitter resentment. "This is all your fault," Chase said when he noticed Ty approaching. "If you hadn't bailed on me, none of this would have happened." "None of what would have happened?" Ty asked, settling onto the concrete steps despite Chase's hostility. "You mean getting held accountable for being a bully? For making people miserable? Just because you could?" "I made this school better," Chase insisted. "Someone has to maintain order. Someone has to keep the freaks and losers in line." "Listen to yourself," Ty said quietly. "You sound insane. These are just people, Chase. They're not freaks or losers, they're just different from you." The conversation that followed was painful and necessary. Ty talked about his brother Marcus, about the nights he'd found the younger boy crying because of harassment at school. He talked about his own complicity, about how his loyalty to Chase had made him part of the problem. And slowly, reluctantly, he tried to help his former best friend understand the difference between leadership and domination. "You could have been great," Ty said finally. "You're smart, you're charismatic, people naturally look up to you. But you chose to use those gifts to hurt people instead of helping them." Chase stared at his hands, his anger slowly giving way to something that might have been regret. "It's too late now. Everyone hates me." "Not everyone," Ty replied. "But earning back their respect, that's going to take time. And it's going to require you to become someone different than who you've been." In the weeks that followed, the wellness group grew. Word spread quietly through the school's network of outsiders and survivors, drawing students who'd been invisible for so long they'd forgotten they mattered. Liam found himself becoming something he'd never expected, a mentor, a quiet leader, who taught through example rather than lectures. The techniques he shared weren't sophisticated military tactics, they were practical skills for everyday survival. How to recognize manipulation, How to project confidence even when you felt afraid. How to seek help without shame. How to support others without losing yourself. The strongest thing you can do, he told the group during one session, is ask for help when you need it. Independence isn't about handling everything alone. It's about knowing your limits and having the courage to reach out. Sarah, the girl with the deployed brother, raised her hand. What if you feel guilty for having problems when other people have it worse? Liam's expression softened with understanding. Pain isn't a competition. Your struggles matter, regardless of what anyone else is going through. And sometimes, taking care of yourself is the best way to take care of the people you love. The group had become something unexpected, not just a support system, but a community. Students who'd felt isolated and powerless were discovering their own strength and using it to lift others up. The culture of Hawkridge Academy was shifting in small but significant ways, and Liam found himself at the center of changes he'd never intended to create. But the most surprising development came from an unexpected source. During the group's sixth meeting, as they were discussing healthy ways to handle anger, Marcus Webb knocked hesitantly on the classroom door. "Is this the wellness group?" he asked, his voice uncertain. "Because I think I need help." Marcus had been one of Chase's most loyal followers, but the events of recent weeks had forced him to confront some uncomfortable truths about himself and his choices. He talked about the pressure to conform, about the fear of becoming a target if he didn't participate in the harassment of others. He talked about feeling trapped in a role that made him hate himself. "I was scared," he admitted to the group. "Scared that if I didn't go along with Chase, he'd turn on me next." But watching what happened with Liam, seeing someone actually stand up, it made me realize that being scared isn't an excuse for hurting people. Liam listened to Marcus's confession with the same calm attention he gave everyone in the group. When the other boy finished, Liam simply said, "It takes courage to admit you were wrong. What matters now is what you do next." The walls that had separated students at Hawkridge Academy were beginning to crack. The rigid social hierarchies that had defined teenage life for so long were being challenged by something revolutionary: the idea that everyone deserved respect, regardless of where they fit in the artificial pecking order. As Liam walked home that evening, he reflected on how much had changed since his arrival at the school. He'd come seeking invisibility and found community instead. He'd tried to hide his strength and discovered that sharing it made him stronger. Most importantly, he'd learned that healing wasn't something you did alone. It was something you did together, with people who understood that everyone was fighting battles that others couldn't see. The transformation wasn't complete yet, and there would be more challenges ahead. But for the first time since leaving the military program, Liam felt like he was exactly where he belonged. The leaked photos appeared on social media at 2:47 a.m. on a Thursday morning, timed for maximum impact when students would discover them before school administrators could respond. They showed Liam in military fatigues, his face younger but unmistakably him, participating in what appeared to be intense combat training exercises. Someone had edited the images with mocking captions: "Fake soldier boy and child playing war games." Chase's fingerprints were all over the leak, though he'd been careful to use anonymous accounts and proxy servers. His suspension had only fueled his resentment, and from his exile, he'd orchestrated what he hoped would be Liam's final humiliation. If he couldn't reclaim his position through direct confrontation, he would destroy his rival through exposure. But Chase had fundamentally misunderstood both his target and his audience. Skylar discovered the post during her early morning social media monitoring, a habit she'd developed while working on her documentary projects. Her first instinct was protective anger, but as she studied the images more carefully, she realized Chase had handed her exactly what she needed to complete Liam's story. "These aren't humiliating," she said to herself, screenshotting everything. Before the posts could be deleted, they're proof. By the time Liam arrived at school, the photos were already spreading through the student body. But instead of the mockery Chase had anticipated, students were sharing them with something approaching awe. The images showed a teenager who had clearly undergone intensive training, whose commitment to service had been real and documented. Rather than undermining Liam's credibility, the photos confirmed everything he'd said about his background. Riley. Chang found Liam at his locker, her expression a mixture of admiration and protective fury. "Did you see what someone posted about you?" "I saw," Liam replied quietly, his hand steady as he organized his textbooks. "It was bound to come out eventually. Aren't you angry? Someone violated your privacy, tried to humiliate you. Someone showed the world who I really am," Liam interrupted gently. "And apparently, that's not something to be ashamed of." The response from the student body was swift and decisive. #StandWithLiam began trending on the school's social platforms within hours. Students who had never spoken to him before approached with words of support. Teachers who had maintained professional distance suddenly looked at him with new respect. Even parents began reaching out, asking if their own children could benefit from the kind of training and discipline. Liam represented Ms. Patel called an emergency assembly to address the situation directly. Principal Martinez, who had been struggling to contain the various scandals swirling around his school, found himself in the unexpected position of defending a student rather than disciplining one. In recent days, Martinez announced to the packed gymnasium, "Private information about one of our students has been shared without permission. This is unacceptable. But what's even more unacceptable is that this information was shared with malicious intent, designed to hurt and humiliate." The principal's words carried unusual weight because everyone knew exactly who he was talking about, even without naming names. Chase's involvement was an open secret, and his reputation sank even further into disgrace. However, Martinez continued, "What the perpetrators failed to understand is that there is nothing shameful about service, nothing embarrassing about dedication, and nothing humiliating about young people who choose to challenge themselves and serve others." The applause that followed was genuine and sustained. Students who had once feared social consequences for supporting Liam now felt empowered to show their respect openly. That afternoon, Skylar uploaded her most ambitious project yet, a comprehensive documentary titled The Real Story. Using the leaked photos as a starting point, she had crafted a narrative about youth military programs, the challenges faced by young veterans, and the courage required to seek help when needed. She interviewed Ms. Patel about trauma recovery, Riley about leadership and respect, and several members of the wellness group about finding strength in community. But the centerpiece was Liam himself, speaking directly to the camera about his experiences with a candor that was both vulnerable and powerful. "People want to know if I'm a hero or a fake," he said in the final segment. "But that's the wrong question. The right question is, what do we do with the experiences we've had, good and bad? How do we use what we've learned to make things better for ourselves and others?" The documentary went viral beyond the school community. Local news stations picked up the story, framing it as an inspiring example of youth resilience and community support. National veterans organizations reached out to offer Liam scholarships and opportunities. The negative attention Chase had tried to generate had backfired spectacularly, transforming Liam from a controversial figure into a symbol of strength and authenticity. Elena watched the documentary with tears streaming down her face, finally understanding the full scope of what her brother had endured and overcome. That evening, she knocked on his bedroom door with a confession of her own. "I was wrong," she said simply, "about asking you to hide who you are, about being afraid of your strength. You've never been the one who needed protecting. I was just too scared to see it. You kept me grounded," Liam replied. "You reminded me that I was still your little brother, not just a soldier. I needed that." "But you're not little anymore," Elena said with a smile that mixed pride and sadness. And watching you help those other kids, seeing the way you've turned your pain into purpose. I've never been more proud of anyone in my life." The backlash Chase had orchestrated had achieved the opposite of its intended effect. Instead of destroying Liam's reputation, it had cemented his position as someone worthy of respect and emulation. The leaked photos became evidence not of deception, but of courage. The attempted humiliation became a celebration of service and resilience. 3 weeks after the photo leak, Liam found Chase Danner crying behind the gymnasium where they'd had their first significant confrontation. The sight should have been satisfying, his tormentor reduced to tears, isolated and defeated. Instead, Liam felt something he hadn't expected: compassion. Chase looked up as Liam approached, his face cycling through shame, anger, and resignation. "Come to gloat?" he asked, his voice hoarse from crying. "No," Liam said simply. He sat down on the concrete steps beside Chase, maintaining a respectful distance, but offering his presence. "I came to see if you were okay. Why would you care?" Chase's laugh was bitter and self-deprecating. "I tried to destroy you. I made your life hell for months. I leaked those photos hoping everyone would turn against you." "I know," Liam replied. "And it worked, just not the way you intended." They sat in silence for several minutes, two teenagers who had been locked in conflict, now sharing an unexpected moment of peace. Around them, the school continued its daily routine, but this small space behind the building felt removed from all of that, like a neutral zone where honesty might be possible. "I don't know who I am without it," Chase said finally. "Without being the guy everyone fears or respects or wants to please. I've been that person for so long, I don't remember how to be anything else." Liam considered his words carefully. "I felt the same way when I left the military program. I defined myself by what I could do, by how strong I was, by the missions I could complete. When that was gone, I didn't know what was left." "But you figured it out," Chase said, glancing at him sideways. "I'm still figuring it out," Liam corrected. "But I learned that strength isn't about what you can take from others. It's about what you can give. It's not about being feared. It's about being trusted." Chase was quiet for a long moment, processing this perspective. "Everyone hates me now. The team, the teachers, even my own father. He keeps asking how I could throw away everything he worked to build for our family." "Your father's reputation isn't your reputation," Liam said gently. "And what people think of you today isn't what they'll think of you forever. But earning back their respect, that's going to take time and work. Why are you being nice to me?" Chase asked, genuine confusion in his voice. "After everything I did to you?" Liam was quiet for a moment, remembering his own lowest points, the moments when he'd felt lost and broken. "Because someone was nice to me when I needed it most. Miss Patel, Elena, even Skylar in her own way. They saw something in me worth saving, even when I couldn't see it myself." "I'm not sure there's anything worth saving in me," Chase said quietly. "There is," Liam replied with certainty. "You're charismatic, intelligent, and when you want to be, you can be genuinely charming. You have leadership abilities that could help people instead of hurting them. But you have to choose to use those gifts differently." Chase looked at him with something that might have been hope. "How do I even start? How do I become someone different when everyone expects me to be the same person I've always been?" "One choice at a time," Liam said. "One interaction at a time. And maybe you start by apologizing to the people you've hurt. Not because you want forgiveness, but because they deserve to hear it." As they sat there, Skylar appeared around the corner of the building, her camera bag slung over her shoulder. She stopped when she saw them together, her journalistic instincts warring with her protective feelings toward Liam. "It's okay," Liam said, noticing her hesitation. "We're just talking." Skylar approached cautiously, taking in Chase's tear-stained face and defeated posture. "Are you documenting this?" Chase asked her, his voice resigned rather than angry. "Should I be?" Skylar replied, her camera remaining in its bag. "Maybe," Chase said after a moment. "Maybe people should see what happens when the bully finally gets what he deserves. Maybe it would help someone else avoid making the same mistakes I did." "The camera doesn't define the moment," Skylar said, settling onto the steps with them. "Sometimes the most important conversations happen when no one's watching." They talked for another hour as the sun began to set. Three teenagers who had been trapped in roles of victim, aggressor, and observer now simply being human together. Chase talked about the pressure he'd felt to maintain his image, about his father's expectations, and his own fear of being ordinary. Liam shared his struggles with PTSD and his ongoing journey toward healing. Skylar spoke about her own experiences as an outsider, about using her camera as both a shield and a weapon. When they finally parted ways, nothing had been fully resolved. Chase still faced consequences for his actions. Liam still carried the weight of his past, and the social dynamics of Hawkridge Academy couldn't be changed overnight. But something important had shifted, the recognition that even in conflict, everyone involved was fighting their own battles and carrying their own pain. "What happens now?" Chase asked as they prepared to leave. "Now you do the work," Liam replied. "You figure out who you want to be, and you start becoming that person. It won't be easy, and not everyone will give you a second chance. But the people who matter will recognize genuine change when they see it." As Liam walked home that evening, he reflected on how strange the day had been. 6 months ago, he would never have imagined sitting peacefully with someone who had caused him so much pain. But his time at Hawkridge Academy had taught him that healing wasn't always about justice or victory. Sometimes it was about understanding and compassion, even for those who had hurt you. The transformation he'd undergone wasn't just about learning to stand up for himself. It was about learning when to extend a hand to help someone else stand up too. Graduation day at Hawkridge Academy dawned clear and bright, with the kind of perfect spring weather that made everything feel possible. Liam stood in front of his bedroom mirror, adjusting the blue cap and gown that transformed him from a transfer student with a complicated past into simply another senior, ready to step into the future. Elena knocked on his door, holding a small wrapped package. "I have something for you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "From Mom." Liam unwrapped the gift carefully, revealing a simple silver chain with dog tags, not military issued, but civilian ones engraved with his name and a message: strength through service, healing through hope. His mother had commissioned them before the accident, a symbol of her belief in the man he would become. "She wanted you to have these when you graduated," Elena explained. "She said they would remind you that being strong doesn't mean being alone." The ceremony itself was a celebration not just of academic achievement, but of transformation. Principal Martinez had chosen Liam to deliver a brief address to his fellow graduates, not as valedictorian, but as someone whose journey embodied the growth and resilience the school hoped to foster in all its students. 6 months ago, Liam began, his voice steady but warm as he looked out at the assembled graduates and their families. "I came to Hawkridge Academy hoping to disappear. I thought that becoming invisible was the same thing as finding peace. I thought that hiding my past would help me build a better future." In the audience, Skylar focused her camera on his face, capturing the quiet confidence that had replaced his earlier defensive posture. Riley Chang smiled from her seat among the honor students, remembering the uncertain young man who had joined the debate team and become one of their strongest voices. Ms. Patel dabbed at her eyes, proud of the progress her student had made. "What I learned," Liam continued, "is that peace doesn't come from hiding who you are. It comes from accepting who you are and using your experiences to help others. Strength isn't about what you can endure alone. It's about what you can build together." He spoke about the wellness group, which had grown to include nearly 50 students, and had become a permanent part of the school's support services. He talked about the importance of asking for help and offering it in return. He mentioned, without naming names, the possibility of redemption and second chances for those willing to do the hard work of change. Chase Danner sat in the back of the gymnasium, having been allowed to attend despite not graduating with his class. His suspension and subsequent academic struggles would delay his graduation by a semester, but he'd requested permission to hear Liam's speech. The months since their conversation behind the gym had been difficult but transformative. Chase had begun therapy, made genuine apologies to many of his former victims, and started volunteering with anti-bullying programs at local middle schools. "The most important thing I've learned," Liam concluded, "is that we all have the choice to be better tomorrow than we were today. Thank you for teaching me that lesson and for showing me what it means to belong somewhere." The applause was sustained and genuine, coming not just from his classmates, but from the entire school community that had watched his transformation with admiration and respect. After the ceremony, as families gathered for photos and celebrations, Liam found himself surrounded by people who had become genuinely important to him. Skylar presented him with a bound copy of all her documentaries about his journey, titled "Finding Strength: A Study in Authentic Leadership." Riley gave him a debate team medal inscribed with "For Excellence in the Art of Thoughtful Persuasion." The members of the wellness group had pooled their resources to create a photo collage showing the growth of their community. Ms. Patel pulled him aside for a private moment, handing him an envelope that contained a letter of recommendation, not for military service, but for a scholarship program in psychology and counseling. "I think you'd make an excellent therapist," she said. "You have the rare combination of strength and empathy that people need when they're struggling to find their way." "I never thought about that career path," Liam admitted. "Sometimes the best paths are the ones we don't see until we're ready to walk them," Ms. Patel replied. "You've learned that healing is possible, and that knowledge is something you could share with others who need hope." As the afternoon wore on, Liam made his way back to the wellness group's meeting room one final time. He'd asked the current members to gather there so he could officially pass leadership to Maya, the sophomore who had first raised her hand to ask about setting boundaries. She had grown into a confident advocate for herself and others, and Liam knew the group would continue to thrive under her guidance. "Remember," he told them, "strength isn't about what you can do to others, it's about what you can do for others. And the most powerful thing you can do is show someone else that they're not alone." The group had prepared their own surprise, a memorial plaque to be installed in the meeting room, dedicating the space to all students seeking strength, healing, and community. It would serve as a reminder that the work they'd started together would continue long after Liam had moved on. As evening approached, Liam walked across the now empty campus one final time. The buildings that had once felt foreign and intimidating now felt familiar, even welcoming. He'd arrived as a broken teenager desperate to hide from his past, and was leaving as a young man who understood that his experiences, both the painful and the powerful, were gifts he could use to help others. At the main entrance, he paused to look back at Hawkridge Academy. In a few months, he would start college on a scholarship that would allow him to study psychology and veteran affairs. He planned to work with young people who had experienced trauma, helping them navigate the difficult transition from survival to healing to service. Elena appeared beside him, car keys in hand and pride shining in her eyes. "Ready to go home?" Liam smiled, understanding that home wasn't just the apartment they shared or even the family they'd built together. Home was the knowledge that he belonged in the world, that his strength had purpose, and that his story, all of it, even the difficult parts, had led him exactly where he needed to be. "Yeah," he said, taking one last look at the school that had taught him the difference between hiding and healing. "I'm ready." As they drove away, the sun setting behind them, Liam felt the quiet peace that comes from knowing you've become the person you were meant to be. He'd learned that true strength wasn't about standing alone. It was about standing with others, lifting them up, and showing them that they too had the power to overcome whatever challenges lay ahead. The boy who had arrived seeking invisibility was leaving as a young man who understood that the most important battles were fought not with force, but with compassion, not in isolation, but in community. And that understanding would guide him for the rest of his life. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.